Why a $20,000 drone costs the Navy $4.3 million to stop. On October 19, 2023, the USS Carney spent 10 hours in combat in the Red Sea. 15 drones, 4 cruise missiles, 19 threats total launched by Houthi militants in Yemen toward Israel and ships in the region. The Carney shot down every single one. The Navy called it the most intense combat engagement by an American warship since World War II. But here's the number that doesn't make the headlines. Each missile fired from the destroyer costs between $2 and $4 million. The drones they were shooting down? Some cost less than $20,000. In one night, the Navy spent more on interceptors than the Houthis spent on their entire attack, by a factor of 200. Over the next 15 months, Navy destroyers would fire more air defense missiles than the service had used in the previous 30 years combined. The total cost crossed $1 billion, and the Houthis kept launching. This is the math problem the Pentagon cannot solve with bigger budgets. A militant group operating out of Yemen is bleeding the world's most expensive Navy dry, not by sinking ships, but by forcing them to defend themselves with missiles that cost more than houses. The Navy knows this isn't sustainable, and they're racing to fix it before the next war starts. The Red Sea reality. To understand how the Navy got here, you need to understand what happened in the Red Sea. In October 2023, Hamas attacked Israel. Within weeks, the Houthis, an Iranian-backed militia that controls much of Yemen, announced they would target any ship they believed was connected to Israel. That meant commercial shipping vessels passing through one of the busiest shipping lanes on Earth. 15% of global trade moves through the Red Sea on its way to the Suez Canal. Container ships, oil tankers, bulk carriers, all funneling through a narrow choke point within range of Houthi missiles and drones. The attacks started almost immediately. Cargo ships hit by missiles, tankers struck by drones. The Houthis weren't just threatening traffic, they were proving they could reach it. The United States responded with Operation Prosperity Guardian, a coalition effort to protect commercial shipping. Navy destroyers took up positions in the Red Sea, escorting merchant vessels and intercepting anything the Houthis launched. What followed was unlike anything the modern Navy had experienced. By January 2025, Navy ships had defended against nearly 400 drones and missiles. They fired over 200 interceptors, a mix of Standard Missile 2s, Standard Missile 6s, and evolved Sea Sparrow missiles. They also fired more than 160 rounds from their 5-inch deck guns. The USS Carney alone conducted 51 separate engagements during its deployment. On some days, crews had multiple threats inbound simultaneously. Anti-ship ballistic missiles, the fastest and most dangerous, had to be engaged within 9 to 20 seconds of launch. There was no room for hesitation. No American sailors were killed. No Navy ships were hit. By any tactical measure, the operation was a success. But the math told a different story. The cost mismatch. The missiles the Navy uses to shoot down drones were never designed for this mission. The Standard Missile 6, the most advanced interceptor in the fleet, was built to destroy Soviet bombers, cruise missiles, and ballistic missile warheads traveling at thousands of miles per hour. It can engage targets beyond the horizon, guided by data from other ships and aircraft. It's one of the most capable air defense weapons ever created. It also costs $4.3 million per shot. The Standard Missile 2 is older and slightly cheaper, at around $2 million. The evolved Sea Sparrow runs about $1.7 million. These are the primary weapons Navy destroyers carry for air defense. Now consider what they're shooting at. Houthi drones are often based on Iranian designs like the Shahed series. They're slow, maybe 100 miles per hour. They're not stealthy. They're guided by basic GPS. The airframe is essentially a flying tube with a warhead attached. Estimates put their cost somewhere between $2,000 and $20,000 each. The math is brutal. a 200-to-1 cost ratio at minimum. Fire enough missiles, and you've spent the cost of a new fighter jet to stop threats that were assembled in a workshop. But the Navy doesn't have cheaper options that work at range. A destroyer protecting a convoy needs to intercept threats miles away before they reach the merchant ships. Short-range systems like the phalanx gun or rolling airframe missile only work when the threat is already close. By then, it might be too late for the vessel you're protecting. So commanders use what they have, and what they have costs millions per trigger pull. The magazine problem. There's another constraint that makes this worse. Ammunition is finite. You can't reload at sea. An Arleigh Burke-class destroyer carries 96 vertical launch cells. That's the total capacity for every type of missile the ship uses: air defense, land attack, anti-submarine. Once those cells are empty, the ship has to return to port to reload. During the Red Sea campaign, destroyers were burning through interceptors at an unprecedented rate. Some ships reportedly fired 40 or more missiles before heading home. The transit back to a port capable of reloading and then back to station could take weeks. That creates gaps. While one ship is gone, another has to cover. And if the attacks keep coming, the math gets worse. Navy Secretary Carlos del Toro acknowledged the problem publicly. The service had fired nearly $1 billion in missiles, and stockpiles are not unlimited. Production lines can only build so many interceptors per year. One senior official described munitions levels as dangerously low. This matters beyond the Red Sea. The Navy's primary concern isn't Yemen, it's China. A conflict in the Pacific would involve far more missiles, far more targets, and far longer distances from resupply. If destroyers are running low fighting Houthis, what happens against a peer adversary with thousands of missiles? The Pentagon understands this, and they're working on solutions, some of which are already being tested. Solution 1: lasers. The most promising long-term answer is directed energy, weapons that shoot beams of light instead of missiles. In fiscal year 2024, the Navy quietly hit a milestone. The destroyer USS Preble fired its Helios laser system at a drone during a weapons test and destroyed it. It was the first confirmed shoot-down by a Navy ship-mounted laser against an aerial target. Helios stands for High Energy Laser with Integrated Optical Dazzler and Surveillance. It's a 60-kilowatt laser built by Lockheed Martin, designed to burn through drones, disable sensors, and potentially engage small boats. The system draws power from the ship's electrical grid, which means the ammunition is essentially unlimited, as long as the ship has fuel to generate electricity. The cost per shot is almost nothing. Pennies for electricity versus millions for a missile. Helios can also scale. The current system operates at 60 kilowatts, but it's designed to increase to 150 kilowatts with future upgrades. At higher power levels, it could potentially engage faster targets, maybe even cruise missiles. But there are significant limitations. First, only one ship has Helios installed, the Preble. The system was delivered in 2022, and fleet-wide deployment is still years away. Second, lasers have physical constraints. They lose effectiveness in rain, fog, and heavy humidity. Atmospheric conditions in the Red Sea are often favorable, but that's not true everywhere the Navy operates. Third, lasers work best against slow targets at relatively short range, a few miles. They're not replacing long-range interceptors anytime soon. They're adding a layer of defense, not eliminating the need for missiles entirely. Still, the potential is real. A destroyer that can burn down cheap drones with electricity instead of firing million-dollar missiles changes the cost equation fundamentally. The Navy is also testing even more powerful systems. A 150-kilowatt laser demonstrator is installed on an amphibious ship, and contracts are underway for systems targeting 400 kilowatts. The technology works. The question is, how fast it can reach the fleet. Solution 2: reload at sea. The second solution attacks the magazine problem directly. In October 2024, the Navy conducted a test that hadn't been done successfully in decades. The cruiser USS Chosin pulled alongside a supply ship in the Pacific, and sailors transferred a missile canister across, then loaded it into a vertical launch cell while both ships were moving. The system is called TRAM, Transferable Rearming Mechanism. It uses a hydraulic crane and rail system to move 25-foot missile canisters from a supply ship to a warship, tilt them vertical, and lower them into the empty VLS cells. Navy Secretary Del Toro watched the test in person. He called it game-changing. The implications are significant. If destroyers can reload at sea, they don't have to leave station to rearm. They can stay in the fight, receive missiles during a standard underway replenishment, and maintain pressure on adversaries without creating gaps in coverage. The concept isn't new. Engineers at Port Hueneme developed a prototype in the 1990s. But after the Cold War ended, the urgency disappeared. The prototype sat in a warehouse for 20 years. The Red Sea brought it back. The Navy is now targeting fleet deployment by 2027. If that timeline holds, destroyers operating in contested waters could theoretically reload their magazines without ever returning to port, a capability that did not exist during the entire Red Sea campaign. Solution 3. Cheaper interceptors. While lasers and at-sea reloading are still maturing, the Navy has already made one tactical adjustment, using cheaper weapons when the threat allows. By mid-2024, ships in the Red Sea had shifted to firing Sidewinder and Hellfire missiles against some Houthi drones. Sidewinders cost around $500,000. Still expensive, but a fraction of an SM-6. Hellfires run about $150,000. The 5-inch deck gun has also proven effective against slow-moving drones. Each round costs a few $1,000s, and destroyers carry hundreds of them. When a drone is flying low and slow, a burst of gunfire can be more practical than a missile. These options don't work for everything. Anti-ship ballistic missiles still require the fastest, most capable interceptors. Cruise missiles flying at low altitude need missiles that can track and maneuver. But for the cheapest threats, the ones that cost $20,000 to build, the Navy is learning to match the weapon to the target. It's not a permanent solution, it's adaptation, and it's buying time until the longer-term fixes arrive. The bigger picture. The Red Sea has become an unintentional laboratory for the future of naval warfare. Drone swarms are not going away. They're getting cheaper, more capable, and more numerous. The Houthis are a militia with limited resources operating out of one of the poorest countries on Earth. And they've forced the United States Navy to spend over $1 billion defending against them. Now imagine a peer adversary. China has invested heavily in anti-ship missiles and unmanned systems. In a Taiwan scenario, the Navy wouldn't face dozens of threats. It could face thousands launched from ships, aircraft, and land-based batteries across a massive theater. The cost asymmetry that favors attackers isn't a bug in the system. It's the defining feature of 21st century warfare. And the Navy has to solve it. With lasers, with at-sea rearming, with cheaper interceptors, with electronic warfare, and with something not yet invented. The Houthis didn't plan to teach the Pentagon a lesson. They just exploited a vulnerability that was always there. On October 19, 2023, the USS Carney won its fight in the Red Sea. Every threat shot down. Every sailor safe. The Navy is still winning those fights today. But each victory costs millions of dollars. And the enemy keeps launching weapons that cost less than a pickup truck. Lasers are coming. At-sea rearming is coming. Cheaper missiles are already in use. The Navy is adapting faster than it has in decades, because it has no choice. The math hasn't changed yet, but for the first time, the solutions are more than theoretical.